Bass. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm, brought to you by FUNKNSTUFF.net. This is the interview show that gets deep in the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I'm your host, ScottG GX, and whether you're listening to the audio podcast version or watching the video version on FUNKNSTUFF.net or through YouTube, and the podcast is available from any leading provider pretty much, iTunes, Spotify, what have you. As always, I thank you so much for your continued interest and support in the show. Speaking of which, if you haven't already, subscribe to the FUNKNSTUFF channel on YouTube. You'll get early premieres, other insights, and very cool stuff. So you want to subscribe and support the show. Also, show some bling, some flair. Get your official gear at the FUNKNSTUFF.net store. There's Truth and Rhythm gear. There's FUNKNSTUFF gear. Very cool stuff. Show your support. Also, I want to give a shout out to the Funk Exhibition Center and Hall of Fame in Dayton, Ohio, of which I'm very proud to be a funk ambassador. For more information, go to thefunkcenter.org and keep the funk alive. Right now, I'm going to take you to an episode featuring Dennis Coffey, the legendary guitar player from Motown and so many other recordings. He's off camera on the phone on this one, but, talk about a legend. I hope you enjoy it, and thanks for tuning in. I am thrilled to welcome to the Truth in Rhythm mothership a funk guitar giant who is a member of Detroit's legendary Funk Brothers, played on some of Motown's most progressive hits, and went on to a decades-long solo career that included the off-sample gold record classic Scorpio. My guest is Dennis Coffey. Dennis, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
And where is here today for you?
Still Metropolitan Detroit, where it all began, man. Still here, doing it, playing every Tuesday night and doing gigs and sessions and whatever, so I'm still at it.
Wow, that's fantastic. Believe it or not, I hate telling people this because I've had so many musicians on the show that are from Detroit, but I've still yet to be to go there. So.
Well, if you do, go to the Northern Lights Lounge on Tuesday night. I've been there for 12 years. We're still rocking it out.
Nice. So glad to hear that. Well, let's jump in, and we're going to test your memory banks a little bit, if that's okay.
Oh, sure.
So, obviously from Detroit, when and how did you first get into guitar, Dennis?
I think. I took a few lessons back when I was, 9 or 10 or something, and these guys weren't real players. They were teachers, so they had these guitar books, and you were playing Yankee Doodle Dandy and all this kind of stuff that didn't make any sense to me anyway. So I didn't bother with it, and then I had a couple of cousins up in the Copper City, Michigan, which is in the Upper Peninsula up there. I used to go up there every summer, Marilyn and Jim Thompson at the time. And they were playing guitars, and they were playing country and western. I says, wow. So they taught me some songs, on that vacation. I was up there for a couple of weeks, and so I says, you can really do this. So then I really saw that it was something that it was, country and western, but it was still music I could relate to. So that got me going. So then when I got back to Detroit, I started, doing a lot of self-taught stuff. Then I'd find a teacher once in a while to teach me a few things, and then just went on from there. I did my first record date and got paid for it. Took a solo on it when I was 15.
Wow! Did you have any musical, talents in your family?
Yeah, I had an Aunt Outie that could sit down at 96 and play ragtime music with no mistakes.
That must have been fun as a kid.
Yeah. So, I watched her, and then her sister used to play piano and teach piano, and my Aunt Martha, she used to, and her daughter could play Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata and sight read it when she was 14. So, had a lot of music in the family.
Nice. And who would you say were some of your early playing influences?
Well, when I first started, I was listening to the blues, Jimmy Reed and B.B. King and all that stuff, and then I went through the period of Chuck Berry and all that guy, those guys, the early guys that were creating that stuff. And also, James Burton was working with Ricky Nelson, and he was working with Elvis. I got to play with James a few times and got to meet him and play with him overseas and stuff. So he's still a great player out there playing. So, and then I got to meet Scotty Moore, who played with Elvis. I got to meet him when I played in Memphis. So those were the kind of guys when I was growing up. And then once I was old enough to go to a bar then, and all the guitar teachers said, well, hey, we're going down to hear this guy, Wes Montgomery. He's like the real deal and so forth. So that's the first time I heard a jazz guitarist. And once I heard Wes, it was like, oh, my God, I got to learn how to do this. So I ended up actually sitting down with him and having a beer every week he'd come here. I'd hang out with him and stuff. And I ended up in L.A. going over to Joe Pass's house all the time. So I learned from those guys as well. So that's kind of where it went for me,
Wow, those are some heavy weights. Yeah. When you were up close to guys like that, did it make you think, wow, I got to really buckle down? What was it like, being in the presence of like a Joe Pass?
Well, I mean, they're very nice guys. Joe Pass used to smoke that big cigar and everything, so he was cool. Wes Montgomery was a nice guy. I'd sit down and buy him a beer. They were all, these were just regular guys that were tremendously talented. And, to be in front of Wes Montgomery and watch him tear off those solos, it was unbelievable. Man, it was just, once I heard that, I said, I got to learn how to play jazz.
And what was your, instrument of choice in those days?
It was always a guitar.
No, but I mean, what type of guitar?
Oh, back in the early days, probably harmony guitars, those, where you could buy a guitar affordable, so I bought, cheap guitars like that. And finally, I think in 1963, I got what I thought was a real good guitar. It's my Gibson Birdland. And so from then on, I was pretty much a Gibson man. And Gibson actually gave me a new 355 back in, I think it was 2008, when I played with Les Paul and Larry Carlton and all those guys. So Gibson gave me a brand new 355, which I...
So I know that you played with Del Shannon early on. How did that materialize?
You know what? I was with a group called the Royal Tones, and Harry Balk was our producer, and he had Impact Records and Twirl Records. And so we were working in the Jersey Shore, and he hooked us up with Del Shannon because he wanted us to back him up. So we went down to, I'm trying to think of the studio. It was in New York City when we played with Del Shannon. I don't know if it was Media Sound or one of those studios. So we could drive down from New Jersey down to New York City and record with him. And we could rehearse with him also because we were working the Jersey Shore. He came up there and rehearsed with us and stuff. So that's how that started. In fact, the first gold record I played with was Handyman with Del Shannon.
Wow. What kind of character or personality was he?
He was a nice guy, you know. He was, but I know we were in Times Square at the time, and when we went out, we were going to go to the movie or something, and you know, Times Square was pretty seedy then. So Del pulls out a whole packet full of bills and stuff. I says, "Are you crazy? You're trying to get us murdered?" I said, "Don't be waving that money around Times Square." So that was the deal. And then it was funny because he was playing in the Ritz, I think, in New York, this club. And I went into the club because Bob Babbitt, I think, was, I don't know if he was playing with him then. But anyway, so Del didn't even know that I was in the audience. And most of the songs that he did in his show, I had recorded with him.
So from there, how did you get exposed to or get into or cultivate, a ability and interest in funk music?
You know what? Bob Babbitt and I used to do back in 62, 63, where a lot of Northern Soul records, Open the Door to Your Heart by Darrell Banks and the Volumes, all that stuff for Harry Balk and different people. And Bob and I could both sight read really good. Most of the guitar players back in the day could not, and a lot of the bass players couldn't. So we started getting a lot of recording sessions in Detroit doing all this music. And that's kind of how we started. Then we got into Golden World and started to do all that. And that's kind of how a lot of that stuff happened, just being at the right place at the right time. Like when I first, with Golden World, I got a call, and a guy called me up and says, "We want to use you on a session." And I says, "Well, when?" He says, "Well, right now the guitar player can't read the charts." So I took my 3-year-old daughter, Jordan, I took her to the studio and stuck her in the corner and did the session and read the charts, and then I was doing Golden World every day.
So what was it like? I'm a bit younger than you are, and so I got into R&B and funk music in the mid '70s. What was it like being there in the late '60s when funk music really was just emerging, and it was fresh and new, and you were hearing James Brown or Sly Stone and these different sounds on the radio at shows? But what was it like to be there and experience that?
Well, you know what? It was good because I was also I was in the service. When I got out of high school, I volunteered for the draft, and I volunteered for the 101st Airborne Division. So I was down there about the time Hendrix was down there, and Fort Campbell. And some the guys in his unit hit his guitar and wouldn't give it back, so he was upset. But my rhythm guitar player, he cut up a guy in a bar fight, so he had to join the airborne to go to prison. So nobody really wanted to try and hide our guitars, I don't think. But that was one part of it. And I was recording down in Columbia, South Carolina when I was down there. There was Maurice Williams was from down there, so I didn't play on stay, but I recorded the record he did after that. I played on. So I was doing sessions while I was in the Army down there. That's kind of how that started. And then when I got out of the Army, I was out of work for 2 weeks, and I sat in for a job with a band, and so I was working 6 nights a week in a club up here in Detroit.
When you were doing those sessions, did you have any leeway? Were you able to add any of your own flavor, or did you really have to go by, what was there?
I think the ones I did down south in Columbia, that we just learned the songs. I think Jimmy McCullough was a keyboard player, and he was writing with this other guy. I can't think of his name, but they wrote some songs together and whatever, and we just learned the songs, and we kind of, once you learn the songs, then you come up with some ideas or whatever. And I had a record out called Holding Hands, May Records out of New York when I was in the Army down there in South Carolina. And they said, well, a guy with the name of Dennis Coffey could never have a hit, so they called me Clark's son. And I did one record for them, Holding Hands, I think it was called, and that was not a hit.
So you had an alias already.
I did. That's the way it was.
So I know you had your solo album debut, I believe, in '69, but
Right.
Can you set the sort of timetable for us of how events progressed in terms of working with Motown and coming out with your first solo record?
Motown, how that came about is I got a call one day from James Jamerson, and he's the legendary bass player. He ended up being my best friend at Motown. So anyways, and he put Hank Crosby on the line. Hank Crosby was Stevie Wonder's producer, and he was a contractor for the musicians. And he says, well, we're putting together this producer's workshop, and we're going to meet upstairs at Golden World because Motown had purchased Golden World Studios. We're going to meet upstairs at Golden World Studios, and we're going to pay you a retainer, put you on a salary, and we're going to meet 4 nights a week for 2.5 hours. And we're going to give the producers at Motown a chance to experiment where they're really not on the clock, like a union session and that kind of thing. And they're not looking at studio time. So I was involved with that. And after, I don't know, a couple months, Norman Whitfield came in, the producer, and he had an arrangement of a song called Cloud 9. So he put that arrangement up and says, well, let's run down this song. And I just happened to have this wah-wah pedal, this Crybaby wah-wah pedal with me, and I put that on at the beginning of that. And Norman says, that's it. That's what I'm looking for. Because he was trying to get into the psychedelic thing anyway. So within the 2 weeks, I was recording Cloud 9 with the Temptations, and it just took off from there.
Wow. So I'm trying to think, that was like 68? Is that about?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Okay.
68, 69. Mm-hmm. But I had already played on hits at Golden World, and I already played on hits with Del Shannon, so I was a seasoned guy already.
And you played on some of the most amazing Temptations tracks. I mean, that was, quite an evolution for them with Norman Whitfield. Can you tell us a little bit about what Norman Whitfield was like in the studio?
Norman was a very dynamic producer. And he was a street guy. He could go into clubs all the time to hear what was going on. So he was connected with the audience, so that's how he stayed in touch with what was happening. And he saw this psychedelic thing coming up, and he wanted to get into that. And I was the guy that helped him do it because I was doing all the fuzz tone. I was doing the wah-wah. I had the Echoplex, like Ball of Confusion and all that stuff. But we didn't overdub anything at Motown. We did it right where we did the tracks. So you go in the studio, and we used to get one song an hour, and we'd read an arrangement we never saw before, and we would play the arrangement correctly because they had good arrangers, so you had to play the chart correctly, and then you could add stuff and everything. And we would do one song an hour with no mistakes and make them hits. That was our job.
Wow. So what were you thinking when you heard a track played back, like Ball of Confusion? Were you like, wow, this is just amazing?
Well, we made our living making the producer and the writers and everybody happy that we were on the sessions with. That was our day-to-day thing. So if we made a record and everything, it's like Still Waters Run Deep. When I played on that for the Four Tops, because the only people that were ever there with us is the producer and arranger. The artists were usually not in the studio. When I heard that, I said, this thing sounds backwards to me. And it really did. And then it came out was a big hit, so that shows you I didn't know. I mean, producers, that's their job. My job was to make them and the writers happy for what I was doing in the studio, and they control the artists. And sometimes the artists were there, but generally they weren't.
Was it a kick, though, when you would, hear it on the radio all the time?
Oh, yeah. I remember for 1 year, I was in 3 songs in Billboard Top 10 and 10 in the Top 100 for a year straight. Because I was also going on to Muscle Shoals recording Wilson Pickett. And then I was recording that night for Holland Dozier and Holland and doing Freda Payne and all those acts. And then I was doing the dramatics, over at United Sound. So we were busy. I was doing 18 sessions a week, 3 hours each here. And I did the same thing when I lived in L.A. I was doing 18 sessions a week.
Wow. I bet you look back and wonder how you kept up that pace, huh?
Well, I was working in the clubs at the same time, especially here, so I would... I was playing 3 nights a week with Melvin Davis and Lyman Woodard in the jazz clubs. So I was doing all that plus doing the sessions and everything else during the week and just working it all out. So it was fun. It was really fun because it was exciting. We were playing new music all the time. And, a session guy, every day is new music. You don't know what it's going to be. You don't know what the song's going to be. Your job. So it was either that or have a short attention span. But I loved it. It was. We were good. The Funk Brothers was the best studio band in the world, I always thought, and we could prove it by the hits.
What were some of the other, hit records that folks would know that you played on the Motown?
Well, you got all the Temptations like Ball of Confusion, Psychedelic Shack. Just my imagination, I created that intro just right on the fly. And most of those things. And then, Someday We'll Be Together. That was with Diana Ross. And then I did War with Edwin Starr. And, we just kept going. So there's a whole list of, my book, Guitars, Bars, and Motown Superstars, has some of the records I could remember I played on. So I got about 5 or 6 pages of all the records I played on that I could remember anyway.
Wow, just my imagination is so iconic.
Well, that introduction is like the introduction to My Girl. I mean, it's right there. So I was glad to be able to put that on there.
And did you ever go out on tour with them, or it was just strictly studio?
No, I went on tour when Scorpio was a hit. I did some touring, and then I toured in 2011 when I had a record out on Strut out of London, and I toured to support that, and I did the entire East Coast and the Midwest, and then I ended up doing Bonnaroo down by Nashville, and then I did South by Southwest a couple times, and then I ended up doing Long Beach, and I ended up doing Seattle and Portland up there, and then I used to do the House of Blues in New Orleans and everything, and then I played in Memphis once as well. So, I got around and did stuff, but at the end of the day, touring is a hard life. It's a lot of, and then I played in London and Paris twice, so I've toured over there as well. But it's part of the job. And then, of course, Rodriguez, that's a whole other story that I did. Me and Mike Theodore found him in the club and stuff. And I opened up for Rodriguez in London and Manchester over there. So that was part of that story, too. And then Searching for Sugar Man, we're in that film, Mike Theodore and I. And then I'm in Standing in Shadows of Motown. And I was on the Jimmy Fallon show with the Roots Band. I mean, you can't get better than that.
Yeah. What was it like? What were guys like Bob Babbitt, who we recently lost, and Jamerson? What were they like?
Jamerson was just Jamerson. No one played like Jamerson ever. Babbitt came close to it, but no one. Jamerson was probably the top bass player in the world. Everybody, even Paul McCartney, was trying to play like Jamerson. I mean, he was the man. I mean, he just had that feel. We used to talk because we were both kind of original to what we did. He was original. That was Jamerson. He didn't try to sound like anybody else. I never tried to sound like anybody else. So that's what we had in common. And his widow still comes down to the Club Annie, and some of his kids will come down to Northern Lights and stuff. So I always give Annie $20 and say, "Here, have a few drinks on me, but don't get drunk."
I've heard that Norman Whitfield was maybe, kind of listening to Funkadelic back in those days.
I played on the first Funkadelic album, and I also played on the first George Clinton album, I Want to Testify. So he was very much listening to that. Norman was a master at dynamics. Norman Whitfield, when he would do a session, he'd be standing right in front of Uriel and Pistol, the two drummers. He would be right in the middle of the rhythm section over there. And he'd be doing all these breakdowns, and I'll cue you when to come in and all that stuff. He was a very hands-on producer, and he got the job done. I mean, he was a visionary. He brought Motown right into the psychedelic era. That was Norman. And I helped him do it.
Yeah, I actually have the first Funkadelic album signed by George framed on my wall behind me as we're talking right now.
Oh,
it's up there.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
What was it like working with George Clinton back then?
On a few of the things, the Funkadelic stuff, I just overdubbed stuff on him, so I went in and it was already done, and he just put me in a room, and I just put some guitar stuff on there. As far as I Want to Testify, the charts were written out, and we just did the arrangements, me and Eddie Willis over there at United Sound. And, George was cool. I like George. It's always nice.
And you also were on Ruth Copeland's album, too?
It's possible. The name sounds familiar to me, yeah.
Yeah, she was like a bit of a Funkadelic protege back then.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I had noticed you had a credit listed for that, so.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about your own albums. You know, you came out in
Okay.
'69 with Hair as
Hearing things.
Hair
Yeah.
and Things. Yeah, boy, that's a rocking album.
It is. It is. It is. I don't know right now. They're trying to figure out because it's been bootlegged over in Europe so much. But that was a funky album. You know, we just did it. It's most of those things are live in the studio. But it shows that Detroit sound. You know, that whole thing. That was a great album. I liked doing it. That was the first one, and the second one was the Evolution. That's where Scorpio came from. So I've had probably about 18 or 19 albums out, I think.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list, Dennis. So how did you decide from Hair and Things to sort of funk it up, go a little more towards the funk and a little less towards the hard rock? What directed you that way?
Well, Hearing Things was not a big hit, you know. So what I did is I was sitting in my basement at the time, and I had a sound-on-sound tape recorder, a Sony, when they just came out. And Mike Theodore and I were writing horns and strings and doing all this stuff for different artists we were producing, and we were hired to do different things like that. And I thought to myself, what if I write these songs, and because I can do sound on sound, I'm going to make it like a guitar band. So I wrote the 10 songs, and I overdubbed these other guitar band concept, and I played that for Mike Theodore and said, I want to do this. And he said, I think it's a great idea. And he got Clarence Avon involved to sign me a deal, and we went in the studio, and we started cutting that album, the Evolution album. And at the same time now, Hank Cosby comes over because I had a demo of It's Your Thing. It was like a finished master demo, you know. And I gave a copy to Hank Cosby at Motown, and Mike Theodore sent a copy to Clarence Avon. And Clarence gave us a deal, and we're ready to go, you know. And I'm already in the studio, and Hank Cosby comes up to me and says, Barry loves that song. He wants to sign into a contract. I said, well, you're too late. I'm already signed. That's kind of how that came about.
And how did you come up with Scorpio in particular?
You know, the way I write is I just sit in my basement and come up with guitar chords and stuff, and I just put it together that way, and that's how the songs just kind of almost write themselves sometime. I mean, they just show up. You know, I start playing some chord patterns, and they lead to other chord patterns, and before you know it, I got a song. I mean, that's just the way I write. And then I'll lay down the tracks on a little recorder and stuff, and then I'll add a couple things to them, and I'll have a song. That's kind of how we did it. And then I wrote the charts out. On the albums, I wrote the charts out for, because it was all guitar band stuff anyway. So I wrote the charts out for that too. And then Theodore and myself went in the studio and we recorded. I remember doing the rhythm guitar track while we were doing the session, and then the breakdown on Scorpio. I just did a breakdown like a la Norman Whitfield, bam, and Babbitt created that amazing solo. It's just how we rolled back then.
Did you require many takes, or I mean, how many takes did it take?
You know what? We were usually doing a song an hour, however long that took, takes-wise, you know. We never counted the takes. Scorpio, maybe it took a little longer because we had that long, it was a long cut and we had the breakdown. But we didn't do the breakdown, we just did it. I mean, we did it in the studio, the breakdown was in there, and Bongo Eddie and Jack Ashford were talking in the background and all that stuff, and then it was done. We went on to the next song, and then I remember in New York, we're mixing it at RCA Victor Studios in New York, me and Mike. And Mike heard all those guys talking in the background. He said, well, let's leave that in there. So we left it in there, and that's how Scorpio was done.
So what was your reaction when it took off like it did?
You know, it was out there for a year and didn't do anything. So I said, well, I did another album. I think it was... right after that, I can't think of the name of the album, but I had horns and strings on there. So then I got a call from Ron Mosley. He was the promo guy for Sussex in New York. And he says, stop whatever you're doing on this other album. And he says, Scorpio's just taken off. And he says, so we're going to go out and I'm going to resurface Scorpio because it took off in a dance club. So he says, I'm going to go after it now. We think we got a hit here. So then I ended up doing Taurus and some more guitar band stuff to put on the other album that I started to use horns and strings on. So I wrote those songs to match the Scorpio stuff.
That certainly had the feel, and the tension of like a, action movie theme,
Well, then I did Black Belt Jones. That ties right into that kind of deal.
Exactly. So did that influence them in signing you up for that?
Clarence got me that because he knew some people at Warner Brothers, and I told Clarence that I wanted to do something with the movie. So I wrote the main theme and the love thing for Black Belt Jones, and I put that counterpoint thing in the middle with all those voices going crazy. And then I ran the voices through my wah-wah pedal through my amplifier. I thought that'd be a good idea.
Did you feel pressure, or did the labels pressure you at all to sort of come up with a Scorpio Part 2?
No. Mike and I just did what we did, and it always turned out fine. As producers, that's what we did. We were given a budget. We were given a timeline, and we had to turn out, we had Jim Gold in the gallery. We were doing them. We had, eventually we were doing Rodriguez, and then we had myself, and that's what we did. We went in the studio, and that was our job, so that's how we worked it.
And I'm looking down this list of impressive credits, and I know there's not even nearly all of them here, and people should get your book that we'll mention again before we part to see everything. But I see that you worked with Valerie Simpson according to this, and also
Yes.
later on Marvin Gaye's I Want You, which was a great mid-'70s album.
Yeah.
Do you have any particular memories? Did you get to work with them, or were you just in the studio on your own?
Valerie and Simpson used to produce stuff at Motown. They probably had the most complex charts of anybody over there. They were excellent. I Want You album, Marvin was smoking a joint the whole time. We're doing the album. Marvin was Marvin. I mean, what are you going to say about that? Now the stuff's legal anyways, but Marvin was just very laid back. What a nice guy. Very, very nice guy.
Also, Quincy Jones's Body Heat, and played with Ringo.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. The Good Night Vienna album, I played on that stuff, and with Quincy Jones, he was the one that Clarence Avant played Scorpio before it came out to Quincy Jones in that album, and Quincy Jones says that would be the hit right away. He knew it.
Wow.
So I did that with him. So that's what we did out there, and the West Coast was different because the Funk Brothers weren't really out there. So, but it was still a good experience. I was working with Tom Jones and everybody else out there. So, and Ringo was very cool. I had just taken a hunting expedition up in Northern California, and I got a call. I don't know how they tracked me down, but he wanted me to do some more overdubs for him. So I come back from my hunting trip, and so Ringo and me are sitting there waiting for Richard Perry, and he's an hour late, so Ringo got to hear about my hunting trip. It was very cool. He's a very nice guy. Ringo's very cool.
I've only heard good things about him.
Yeah.
Also, the Dramatics, of course. I don't think you can work in Detroit and not do something with the Dramatics, right?
Yeah, well, I did that thing In the Rain, that Echoplex thing with that. And then I put this other device on, What You See Is What You Get for them. They were big hits for them.
Johnny Mathis, sort of the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, that was a kind of a commercial we did, and he wasn't there when we did the track, but I did get a chance to meet him. But it's just, when you're doing sessions, so many of them, I remember when we did an album with Tom Jones, he was sitting in the corner the whole time. He didn't say much, but, we did stuff for him.
Also, Undisputed Truth over at Motown, right?
Yeah. We did. I did Smiling Faces. That's me doing that guitar solo on there. I made that up during the session.
I had Joe Harris was on the show. Very enjoyable.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. Very nice guy. I've seen him every so often. Later on, I've seen him at a club or some event or something.
So, out of the rest of your records, you ended up signing with Westbound in the mid-'70s and doing some records there.
Right.
Was the seed planted there from when you worked on that first Funkadelic record, or nothing to do with that?
I don't think it had anything to do with that. What had happened was that we were under salary with Clarence Avant, and he was having some problems with the label. And so we were out in L.A., and I wanted to come back to Detroit. So Clarence was nice enough to let us out of the contract, and Armin Baladian was nice enough to sign us to a contract as producers for Westbound. So when we came back to Detroit, we had a job. I mean, it didn't last that long, but at least we had something.
And I mean, chart-wise, I'm guessing sales-wise, Finger Lickin' Good was a bit of a comeback, right?
Yeah.
With its, was that a controversial cover at the time?
Very much so, but I didn't do it. I didn't design that cover, so it wasn't my fault. They pulled it out. They wouldn't even put it in some record stores, but that was not my, I didn't do that. You don't see my cover designed by me. I learned quite a few years ago, don't mess with the art director's job and try and do a cover, or it'll just delay your album for about a year, so I stayed out of their business.
Yeah, but it probably helped sell some more fried chicken anyway.
Yeah, hopefully. Too bad they didn't get Kentucky Fried involved. We've made some money.
You also were on CJ and Company.
Yeah, Mike Theodore and I found them. We did Devil's Gun, and they were a good group. I mean, that was a number one disco record in the country.
How did you feel about disco? I mean, you obviously were in funk, and a lot of funk, artists felt, differently. Some jumped right into disco, and other ones, felt it was sort of a sellout. How did you feel?
Well, you know what? What's it? Saturday Night Live? Was that the name of it? What's that record they did with that movie?
Staying Alive.
Staying Alive, yeah. Mike Theodore and I used to go down to the studio down there in Fort Lauderdale, and we used to do mixes down there. It was a good studio down there, and that first album, it was disco, but it wasn't what disco became. It was the beginning of kind of disco, but it was very funky. It was a soulful disco record, I thought. It really had a soulful sound to it. So, but then, disco changed, and it's like anything else. I've gone to disco conventions, and Mike Theodore and I, because we had disco hits and everything. It's all part of the business. It wasn't, whatever seemed to be going. If you're making a living as a record producer, you just can't. I won't do this or won't do that. You just try and survive.
You also worked with David Ruffin and Boss Skaggs.
Yep. Those are just, you go do sessions, and, you get done with the session, you get paid, and you go home. It's kind of, I did one thing out in L.A. where Mike Campbell was an artist at Motown, and so he ended up being an actor later on. So anyways, we rehearsed for a showcase for him at the Troubadour. So anyways, we rehearsed, and so we go to the gig that night. We rehearsed the songs. So they made us wear these Desi Arnaz with the big sleeve shirts. And so we're up there on stage, and I don't know what got into Mike Campbell, but he shows up at the finale to the song we're doing, Gonna Get Married in the Chapel of Love, and Mike Campbell's wearing a wedding gown. And then, if that's not bad enough, and I could see Pops Gordy sitting in the front cringing, he lifts up he's got two girls dressed, they're dressed like, in canoes. I don't know, it's like canoes. I don't know, they're supposed to be what they were supposed to be in the canoe deals with the big canoes sticking out. Anyways, Mike Campbell lifts up his wedding gown, and this midget, a male midget in a strapless evening gown, jumps out and starts dancing on the stage with everybody. I said, man, that's about a 3 martini night there. Wow.
What year was that?
That was probably 74, 75 maybe.
Wow. That sounds like a George Clinton kind of thing. I'm later on, I know they had a guitar player that would wear a wedding dress.
Yeah, George Clinton did that. Well, that's what Michael did. That was the thing that he did with the wedding gown, Mike Campbell.
I've heard that Berry Gordy wasn't exactly embracing of funk, and that he didn't like the term and so forth. Did you get any sense of him having sort of a disdain or dislike for the genre or for anything related to it?
I think Norman Whitfield was the one that put that together, and I only saw Berry Gordy in the studio twice. All the time I was at Mo West and at Motown here, and I saw him twice with Diana Ross in the studio. That's the only time I ever saw him in there.
Did you sense though that Whitfield had to battle for any of the music he was trying to get through the Motown machine?
Possible. But once he did Cloud 9, and that was the first Grammy that Motown got, I don't think there was a problem after that.
And you were the first white artist, I understand, to appear on Soul Train.
Absolutely. That cut's still out there. I think they finally found it because I think it was on that the Black Godfather. I think Clarence Avant found that and showed a cut of that.
What was that experience like?
Well, usually a lot of people were doing lip syncs to records. I brought my whole band in there. And when the kids found out I was going to be on that, they packed that place. You couldn't move in there. The kids were going crazy. So it was I had a lot of fun with that. I really enjoyed it.
Did you just do the one track or two songs?
I just did Scorpio. That was the track, and then I did American Bandstand while I was out there. But that was a pantomime thing. And I was Mike Douglas' show in New York, and that was just. I think I played my guitar to a track that we brought out there or something with that thing.
So of course, Scorpio went on to be, certainly one of the most sampled recordings by hip hop and rappers.
I think it's about 110 times so far.
That's just incredible. When did you first become aware that someone had done that, and how did you feel about it?
The first group that did it was Public Enemy, and I was in the studio mixing another album, and I said, "Well, what are the new people doing? What's the new records like? And so I was at Studio A with Eric Morganson, and he's playing me this thing by Public Enemy, and here I hear Getting It On, my track that they're rapping to. I don't remember getting paid for that. And the guys at Public Enemy told me later, well, we didn't have any money to pay you guys, so we sampled it. So I told Clarence Avant, I says, we're getting sampled here. So at that time, Clarence Avant was the chairman of the board of Motown, and he was in New York. He says, well, we're not going to run around suing everybody. He says, I'll talk to these label presidents, and we'll work out a way where you get some money. So I started getting part writing on all the songs that were using my samples.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah. I'm sure I didn't get all of it, but I didn't have to sue anybody, and so that's how it worked. So I did get some money, so that was all right.
I know, though, in '82, some years before Public Enemy, Grandmaster Flash did a track called Scorpio. I thought that used the music, too.
Well, they probably did, but they were probably paying, for the sample, I would imagine, I know Young MC did it, and then LL Cool J did it, too. They used part of Scorpios in their stuff.
Did you ever get any direct feedback from any of those guys? What appealed to them about it so much that they incorporate into their own works?
I did talk to Public Enemy briefly, but not really about that. I think part of the thing that really, in those days, is we had this big breakdown where you had the congas and all that stuff. So it was pretty easy to sample that, and you could, because that was the groove. So they used those breakdowns, and they sampled the breakdowns because there wasn't any music. They were just a drum breakdown and conga breakdowns and all that. So it was easy for them to sample that and link it up and put stuff over it, But they liked it, apparently, and it was a hit. So that's why they sampled it. So it seemed to work because it certainly helped sell a lot of hip-hop records, and then the hip-hop guys all knew who I was.
As you were doing your thing through the 70s and into the 80s, Dennis, were there any other acts out there or guitar players that kind of caught your ear and that you, in particular, took a liking to?
Other than just some of the guys, I did, I played with Les Paul. You can't get better than that, and, I did a thing with Larry Carlton. He's an excellent player. And some of the guys, but that was kind of, we were just working doing stuff. That's how I looked at it. And there was a point in my life where suddenly the phone stops ringing. It happens to everybody. So I ended up working on assembly line at GM to support my family, and then I ended up going back to Wayne State University. My undergrad was music and harmony and theory, and I ended up getting a bachelor's degree in general studies, and I ended up getting a master's degree in education. So I ended up the last 10 years of my career, I was a lean manufacturing consultant at Ford Motor Company, and they were sending me all over they sent me to Germany a couple times, and then I was going to all their plants and everything, and I was a coach and assessor of the plants and everything. So I made good money at it. So that was how I found something else to do.
Well, it's like the second chapter of your life there.
Yeah. And then after that was over, and Ford downsized, of course, and let the consultants go, made their superintendents early retire and all that stuff. So, but that was about right time for me to retire anyway. So it just segued in, and that's just okay. Now I'm going back to music. So away we went.
And I don't know what year that was, but I do know that in 2010, you, along with the Funk Brothers, were inducted into the Michigan Rock and Roll Legends Hall of Fame, and then just a year or two ago, you got in on your own.
Yeah.
So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
How did that feel? Is that something that was important to you?
Well, anytime you get, my home state, I've lived here pretty much other than L.A. and New York, but I've lived here most of my life, so it's really great to get recognized in your home state and so forth. So I'm always appreciative of things like that, so that was good, And again, I've got gold records and all that other stuff, which is good as well. So, and then I've got a Funk Brother Award from the R&B Foundation, so that's another one that's good. And I've got quite a few Detroit Music Awards and all that stuff up there, so life is good.
How would you describe your approach to the instrument?
I consider myself a student of the instrument. I mean, a guitar is a people's instrument because you can take a guitar and not throw it, but you can take a guitar to the beach, you can take the guitar to the party, you can do whatever because it's one of those instruments you can do that with. So I've always considered myself a student of the guitar. I have probably about 10 different guitars right now. So I'm still learning. I'm still learning, and I never play the same song the same way twice, even on my job when I do my shows every Tuesday night at Northern Lights. We'll do the same songs, but other than the melody, that's it. I take a jazz approach to it, and once we count off the song, then I never play a solo the same way twice. That would make me really bored. So that's why I'm still doing it, because I have the freedom to do what I want. The club owner never tells me what to do. And the guys in the band, I don't tell them what to do. I count off the songs and say, let's go. And so we have fun.
What would be your advice to somebody who maybe plays in a different genre or is just learning guitar, a couple of like keys to being able to be, on it when you're playing funk in particular?
Well, you know what? It's like it's pursuit of excellence. When I was going to high school on summer break all summer, I would practice 8 hours a day. So that was my whole point. If there was a guitar teacher around that knew something that I didn't know, I'd take lessons. My undergrad, I majored in harmony and theory at Wayne State, so I could write arrangements. I could write anything I could hear in my head. I could write on paper and hire someone to play it and sound like it's supposed to sound. So when I went to Wayne State University, I learned the mechanics of music, the mechanics of harmony and theory, how this stuff makes sense. And so that was a big thing for me, to be able to communicate musically with others and how do you write arrangements and do all that stuff. That was very important. So but I'm still learning. I'm still learning when I play and everything, and learning new songs and stuff. And so that's the way I look at it. It's a journey. You're on a journey. It's not like you get up one day and, I'm not the best at this and that's the end, so I'll just go do this. And some people go out and do their shows just like the records, and they make a living doing it. I couldn't do that. It drives me crazy. Every time we do Scorpio, it's different, but it's fun.
What would you say is your own personal favorite genre? Would it be jazz?
Right now, I'm more into probably the contemporary jazz. It's not. I can play traditional. In fact, the album I just had out on on Detroit Music Factory is more of a traditional jazz album. So, but right now, I'm leaning more towards the contemporary jazz.
Yeah, I took a listen to that, Dennis. Very nice. Down by the River came out just last year.
Yeah. So, and I managed to get an album out for about 3 years in a row because I had that album on Resonance, and then I had a couple of albums out on this other label, Omnivore. So, still out there.
Is there a particular record that you made other than Scorpio that is your favorite or you feel most proud of?
Well, you know what? Scorpio was my biggest hit, so that was very cool. But I also, the Cloud 9 session I did with Motown, because it was the first session I did over there. And that record's kicking. If you listen to the groove with the Funks on Cloud 9, that's an amazing record by the Temps. So that just sticks in my mind, And I like playing on the Fallon show with the Roots band. That was another good thing. And then playing with Les Paul and all that stuff at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Larry Carlton and those guys, that was all just great things. And then I played at the House of Blues in New Orleans a couple times down there with little Buck Seneca's band, and Buckwheat Zydeco was on B3 organ and all that stuff. That was another great experience. So we had, and I got a chance at Memphis to hear the original Sun Records rhythm section, the guys that were still left doing stuff down there, so you get to hear that. So, and then going to Europe, London and Paris and all that stuff, hearing all that stuff, working with the guys. I had the rhythm section with some Manchester in the UK. They played behind me. They did an excellent job playing that stuff.
With all the sampling and heavy production today, do you still feel like there's a decent emergence or flow of quality players?
I think the young people, they can play. I mean, they're not horsing around. Yeah, you get some that are going to be using samples and they're going to be doing, maybe the hip hop stuff, but you got country musicians, you got jazz musicians, you got pop musicians. There's a song, there's a special on Netflix, Hired Hands, I think it's called. But this is an excellent portrayal of studio guys and what they do, and guys that back up major artists on the road, all the work that they do. I mean, that's a whole scenario, and the young people can play. I mean, they're not. It's just part of the DNA, I think, maybe in America, maybe in other countries as well. I mean, the young folks, in Detroit especially, you got young musicians that are great musicians. They're coming out of the woodwork in Detroit all over the place. It's still the same way when Motown started here. And Barry Gordy told me himself he started Motown in Detroit because of the talent that was here, and he was right on with that. And he was a visionary. Look what he did with Motown.
And he's still he's still with us, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you can go any night of the week in Detroit and hear any kind of music, 7 nights a week. Detroit is such a musical town. It's just part of the DNA here.
One other track I just noticed that we didn't mention that I just want the listeners and viewers to also be aware of. You played on Band of Gold?
Yes, I used electric sitar for that, a choral electric sitar I bought. So I used that on that record with Freda Payne.
Wow. Such classic recordings, Dennis. It's been an honor to talk to you about it.
Well, I'm glad someone's still interested, so I'm always blabbing. Why not? I talk at the Motown Museum sometime, too. So I donated one of my guitars to the Motown Museum. So when you go in the Motown Museum, you'll see my guitar sitting there. I put it where it was when I played on it, and I put the wah-wah pedal and plugged it all up like it used to be. So and they'll send people down on Tuesday night right from the museum tour. They'll send them down to hear me play live, so it all kind of works together.
Wow, that's fantastic. And again, that book that you mentioned came out in 2004, but still available, Guitars, Bars, and Motown Superstars.
Yeah, on University of Michigan Press is the publisher.
And the album is Down by the River. And where's the best place for people to keep up with you and, you know, maybe pick up a record like that?
Well, they can go on my website is Dennis Coffey, SITE.com. And they can see stuff on there, and I have they can hear some of my records on there, but there's a bunch of stuff on that website.
Outstanding. You know, I enjoyed I got to see Les Paul play the Iridium, you know, in his latter years. And
I played when Les, I played with him when he was still alive at the Iridium. I sat in with him. But then, after he passed away, Gibson Guitar had me play with his trio on his birthday in Waukesha, where he was born. So I ended up taking his place with his trio for some gigs for Gibson, which is very nice.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Dennis, you know, keep me informed if you put something else out, and I hope I get a chance to catch you perform someday as well.
Okay, well, we're here doing it. Anytime you get in town, you know, give me a jingle or whatever and let me know.
Very good. Thank you so much for doing Truth and Rhythm.
Okay, thank you.
All right, take care now.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye-bye. Hey, back at Truth and Rhythm headquarters. Thank you for joining us on another magical ride with Truth and Rhythm. Whether you're watching or listening, as always, thank you so much for your continued interest and support. Be sure to subscribe. Go to YouTube. Go to the FUNKNSTUFF Channel. That's where Truth and Rhythm lives and breathes and thrives. Also, goodies here like TIR Quick Takes. And if you subscribe, you know what? You get the show before anyone else. It's free. If you love jazz, funk, R&B, soul, you can't miss it. Pass it along. Tell a friend. Tell family. This audience is growing, and it is a beautiful thing, all coming together for the love of this great music. Also, if you can throw us a buck or two, we could use the support financially, keeping the lights on, keeping the servers going, all these expenses. If you can help support the program, whatever you can give, much appreciated. Go to the FUNKNSTUFF.net website, and on the right-hand side of every page, you just click and you can donate through PayPal, credit card, whatever. Very easy to do and so much appreciated. And if you do a sizable donation, I will mention you on the program. Also, drop me a line. Email me at ScottG@FUNKNSTUFF.net. Let me know who else you'd like to see on the show, what you enjoy about the music. Let's just kibitz and talk about stuff, you know, talk music. You'll find that I respond very quickly, and I much enjoy the rapport and the camaraderie and the interaction. Always remember, this is your show, The True Music Lover. So for now, that's all the time we have for this one. It's a wrap. As always, Scott Dr. GX Goldfine saying, keep on vibrating to the rhythm of the one.
Hit me, y'all! Y'all better take some insurance out on your booty tonight. Because we are not responsible. Ain't it fucking that?